Okay, in this section, we are going to be talk about the high-level reference architecture for the enterprise using a SageMaker. So here, let me start with the high level of the account. Okay, I'm not saying this is the way you need to set up. I'm just telling this is a high level of setting up the MLOPS with a SageMaker with a multiple account. Let's start with this data account. This is where we store all the data. The data can be in any format. It can be S3, or it can be in EFS, or it can be NoSQL on DynamoDB, or the data can be on the structured format in RDS or Aurora. And so if you are using Athena as a front end for S3, if you are building a machine learning using a data wrangler to connect to Athena, it has a connectivity to Athena. Or you can use a glue for a job to transform the data and keep the glue catalog of your schema structure. The same thing go for EMR for Spark processing, or if you're using any data on the keeping under the Presto for any other use cases. Or you can the data can be resided on the Redshift, also a Redshift where it's a data warehouse. So if the data can be in any format, okay. And all we are expecting is we need to have a separate account for the data account. If it is spread across, it will be a multiple account. But you have to use the data lake, AWS data lake for governance, where it will make sure that if the right people have a right access, it manage the metadata of all the data stored. Okay. The next one comes under security. This I would say these are all foundation. We need to make sure everything on the permissive control, it the least privileges using IAM, and use a cloud trial for audit all the access on the data side as well as our MLOps infrastructure side, I say. Then you can use a security hub to do the auditing and monitoring of your security in posture of your infrastructure. And you can use a guard to make sure you are applying the right KMS encryption or S3 encryption. Apply the guardrails. You can use a guard duty for that. Okay. Overall, you can say you can use the AWS control tower to provision your standard infrastructure and extend that infrastructure to the MLOps. That would be the ideal fit, I would say. We will discuss in our section about the data lake as well as control tower at the high level, so you will get a better understanding of how to architect the enterprise level MLOps using a SageMaker. Then comes a SageMaker development account. I would say this is where the data science landing zone is. Okay, here we use a SageMaker role manager and provide the right access to the individual SageMaker Studio lab. Okay, so SageMaker Studio is the IDE. We will the next part of discussion. We are going to deep dive into the studio. We will talk about the architecture of the studio and how we can use a secured way, and what is the difference between a SageMaker lab and SageMaker studio. We will discuss more in the detail next section. So the data scientist can use this IDE, develop their code, and commit to the code commit, which is nothing but a Git repo for on the AWS side, and they can use the any variables or config in S3 bucket. Okay. So once the code is into the code commit, we can use a SageMaker. We can trigger the SageMaker pipeline to train, and if there is any custom logic to be used to invoke the lambda function, you can invoke the lambda function. If that during the training job it need to connect to the EMR, you can connect to the EMR, train the machine learning model, and then store the artifact into the S3 bucket. At the same time, if there is any future store, make sure that you are storing your future store into the SageMaker future store. Okay, so if there is any future store to be used by the other machine learning model or different purpose of the different data scientists can need to use, you can use the SageMaker future store to store that. And this need to be done on the separate account we call as a machine learning execution account. The reason why we don't want to use on the data science development account and the machine learning execution account is here we can monitor, you can do all the auditing of the compute, and the QC team or the data scientist lead can come here and check the model code, model dashboard, or registry. It's kind of more governance can be done at this account. Okay, so now you train the model, you store the artifacts, and you store it for the governance on the dashboard and the code. Then once it is done, you uh, once the model is trained, you can store it back to the S3 bucket, okay, based on the baseline or accuracy you are expected, okay. And you can go top of the shared services. I thought of talking about the shared services before the machine learning execution environment, but now I've given you the highlight of the machine learning execution environment. I can give a little bit more about the shared services. Here we store all the artifacts. Let's say any machine learning training or deployment, AWS provide a pre-built image of different frameworks like a TensorFlow, MXNet, PyTorch, or you can use a Hugging Face. Everything we have a pre-built images, so everything you can take it from the easier as part of your machine learning training or deployment. But if you want to build a custom image, you need to make sure you have to store in ECR and store the your image, and you can store in a code commit for your custom image where you can continuously build and build your container, which in turn call from the SageMaker pipeline. So I would say the shared services where you have all the CI/CD part is running. Then once it is ready, once a SageMaker pipeline is ready, you register your model into the SageMaker registry. If it is a batch transform, you can use a batch transform. If it is a real-time inference, you can deploy that once real-time inference. If you want, you can have approval step. If you don't want to have approval step, you can skip that part. You can configure the event bridge, which in turn it trigger the pipeline and deploy your um, SageMaker inference on the staging account, and the endpoint will be served by calling from the Lambda function and consumed in the API gateway from the user. Okay, so with this account you can dedicatedly handle it for doing a testing of your model and its accuracy and features. Then if it everything goes fine, you can deploy to the production. But here we are adding one extra step. You can use the SageMaker shadow. I think we highly touched upon on the previous video about how we can use a SageMaker shadow where we can get the real data uh, before productionizing it. Okay, so at the same time you collect the real data and feed that data back to the data layer, so that the next machine learning model trained with the new data, and you also store your inference output into the separate S3 bucket where you can use a SageMaker monitor to see is there any data drift or the model drift happened. So this production account will be the production environment will be consumed by the application user, or from your front end you can call the application API. I'm not saying this is exact way to do it. I prefer, and this is a quick start I can say we are doing it. As part of our training or as part of our exercise, we try to cover each and every component we highlighted in this topic, uh, highlighted in this diagram, and we try to build everything in a single account using a Terraform. That is the objective of our session. Okay, so at this end of this uh, course or the training, I want you guys to be comfortable on understanding what is MLOPS and how you can use the SageMaker as tools or components to build together a better MLOps architecture for your enterprise. Thank you. Stay tuned. Next, we will meet you on the demo section.